All roads lead to population reduction. Be it this story about a 23-year-old woman who was euthanized in Belgium due to depression. How about another story? A 29-year-old woman, also depressed, euthanized. Or the stories coming out of Canada, where a veteran called in saying that he wasn't feeling well mentally, and they said, why don't you die? Now, that's one element that I want to focus on in this segment. But there's also just, how about this? War. Yeah, World War III is around the corner. Maybe it won't happen, but that's certainly going to result in a reduced population. The war itself is resulting in food shortages. It's going to result in a lowering of the population. You then have farmers being told in the Netherlands not to farm at a time when we're facing a food crisis. That's going to result in a lower population. You have the expansion of you have the pro-abortion faction, well beyond pro-choice, saying, advocating for laws that would allow abortion to the point of birth. That's going to result in less people. You have the sterilization of children. Now, the conspiracy theory, I suppose, is that it's intentional, that someone is orchestrating these events to make it happen. I don't know about none of that. I'm just saying that we are moving in a disgusting, hellish direction. To see in Europe that healthy young women are being killed. Yo, that's crazy. And there's another story that I covered earlier about Cori Bush, a progressive Democrat who tells the story of undergoing a forced abortion. Now, there's hope. I think people are starting to see this. They recognize that something is wrong. And just because crime in general, Democrats may end up losing. And, all of these policies seem to be coming from one side of the aisle. Because regular people are getting fed up with high gas prices, shortages of goods across the board, labor shortages, and because stories like this are shocking, maybe people will wake up to what's happening. Now, of course, there's a question of, are there too many people? And in some respects, I would agree. It's very difficult to manage billions of people. In a country like the United States with 320 some odd million, it is very difficult to effectively govern. I mean, that's reality. But you have two different camps. You have the Bill Gates camp. You have the global elites who believe there are too many people. Bill Gates has talked about how we can reduce population growth. And then you have the Elon Musk camp where he says, no, in fact, we need more people. Now, I happen to believe I don't know about need more people, but we can certainly accommodate more people. My view is that the problem is population density in big cities. I think that results in a hyper concentration of waste, which is hard to dissipate. So if we start by saying, get out of the cities, become more self-sufficient, then we don't have that much to worry about in terms of overpopulation. But it's more than that. Climate change. Climate change proposes a Green New Deal, proposes a reduction of fossil fuels, and hey, that one's the most alarming. When Greta Thunberg comes out and says, we will not wait, we must stop fossil fuels now, she's outright saying we should kill 60 million people overnight. And the worst is those who have diabetes, because insulin needs to be refrigerated. If you do not have self-sufficiency, if you are not self-sufficient and the grid does get harmed, I mean, you're in trouble. So I'll say this from the get-go. Euthanasia is here. It's in Canada. It's in Europe. They are just going to start killing people. And there's a question I got on Twitter, but why? Why does it matter? People aren't obligated to live. Yeah, I'll explain to you why it's bad. Simply put, when they do kill you, they'll just claim you chose it. That's the scary reality that we face if we allow policies like this to move forward. But it's a policy, it is a movement of death. It is a death cult. The woke cult, the policies they support, whether intentional or not. I don't know about any conspiracies. All I know is what they're supporting is death. Let's read this shocking story. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com. Become a member to support our work directly. All of our journalists working around the clock are supported by you as members. That's how it works. When you guys sign up to contribute, you'll get access to the uncensored Timcast IRL members only show, Cast Castle, Tales from the Inverted World, and the Green Room behind the scenes with our guests. And as a member, that funding helps employ all of our journalists who are reporting the news every single day and doing a good job of fact checking it. If you like the work we do, become a member at timcast.com, but don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and most importantly, share this video because YouTube, I'm being told, is not notifying people anymore. You can hit the little bell. You can say, yes, notify me, but still people are saying they're not getting it. The midterms are about a month away. And maybe there's something political there. So if you want to counteract the censorship, you can be the notification by taking the video and sharing it on social media. Here's the story from the Daily Mail. A woman who survived the Brussels airport terror attack has died after choosing to be euthanized due to severe depression and PTSD she suffered following the incident. Shanti de Corte, 23, was walking through the departures lounge of the Belgian airport in Zaventem on March 22, 2016, with her school classmates ahead of a trip to Italy when ISIS detonated a bomb. The then 17-year-old escaped the explosion, which together with two other detonations claimed 32 lives and injured more than 300 without suffering any physical wounds. But the psychological effects of the ordeal left her racked by constant panic attacks and bouts of dark depression from which she never managed to emerge. Despite attending a psychiatric hospital in her hometown of Antwerp for rehabilitation and taking a range of antidepressant medications, Shanti was unable to shake the specter of depression and attempted suicide on two different occasions in 2018 and 2020. Earlier this year, the troubled young woman opted to be euthanized, a procedure which is illegal in Belgium, and died on May 7th, 2022, after two psychiatrists approved her request. Shanti's tragic story was brought to light earlier this week when her mother, Mariel, told Belgian outlet VRT of her daughter's pain. That day really cracked her. She never felt safe after that. She didn't want to go anywhere where other people were out of fear. She also had frequent panic attacks, and she never got rid of it. Now, I want to make sure it's clear. This woman did not have a terminal illness. She was not bleeding or cancerous or suffering from a degenerative disease. No, it was mental anguish. Now, I get it. That can be intense. But to kill an otherwise healthy person? Dark days indeed. Shanti frequently recalled her experiences following the bombing on social media and spoke of her struggles dealing with her declining mental health. In one post, she wrote, "I get a few medications for breakfast and up to 11 antidepressants a day. I couldn't live without it. With all the medications I take, I feel like a ghost that can't feel anything anymore. Maybe there were other solutions than medications." I want you to understand something. People like to jump from the Golden Gate Bridge as a method of taking their own lives. It's tragic. It's unfortunate. Sometimes people survive. Every single person who survived, this is according to one documentary, every single one said the moment they jumped, there it was, a moment of clarity, that everything they suffered from, every problem they faced could be solved, except having just jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge. And when they were severely injured but survived, they were grateful to be alive. It's kind of crazy how that works. A sort of wake-up call that when placed in a situation where your life may end and you've lost control, every single person said, "I'm glad I didn't die," because the depression is fleeting. What I see here is a story, and I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't know. I see a story of someone who needed help, not drugs. They go on to say, the 23-year-old had been suffering from severe depression before she opted to end her life, according to her school psychologist. She told RTBF, a media outlet, "There are some students who react worse than others to traumatic events. And having interviewed her twice, I can tell you that Shanti de Corte was one of those fragile students." The psychologist referred Shanti to a psychiatric hospital in Antwerp, which the young woman regularly attended. But in 2018, she tried to commit suicide after a sudden decline in her mental state following an altercation with another patient who sexually assaulted her. You see, this is not just about the trauma of an attack. This is about someone who is being victimized, even in these hospitals. Or I should say, maybe not in the hospital, but by a patient. So in 2020, she made another attempt. You know, the issue I take with this is when they try to make it seem like it's related to terror, there's something else going on in this woman's life, and she could have been saved. The woman was euthanized on May 7th, 2022, surrounded by her family. In one final touching post on social media, the day she was euthanized, she wrote, "I was laughing and crying until the last day. I loved and was allowed to feel what true love is. Now I will go away in peace. Know that I miss you already." The case may yet not be closed, as Antwerp prosecutors begin an investigation of receiving complaints from a neurologist at the UZC Brugman Academic Clinical Hospital in Brussels, who said the decision to euthanize Shanti was made prematurely. The Federal Commission for the Control and Evaluation of Euthanasia in Belgium had no concerns over the case. But neurologist Paul Deltenre argued that there were still different modalities of care and treatment available to Shanti that were not tried according to RTBF. This is a story from Terra Femina. It is, I believe this is a European. It's a website. It's French. I think it's French. It's a website aimed at women that covers social issues work from a feminist perspective. And I've run a translation on it, which basically breaks down everything that happened. And it's shocking. I believe it's a French feminist paper. There's more. It's not just this one woman. I think it's horrifying what we're beginning to witness. Euthanasia for young, healthy people. What do we do? I don't know. Some people responded on Twitter saying, good riddance. And there is an interesting question about the reduction in population. It's who's having their population reduced. It's not conservatives. I mean, through opioids, maybe. Through opiate addiction that's destroying many in more rural areas. But you take a look at sterilization, abortion, and euthanasia, and it tends to be the left. So many people come out and say, yeah, they were weak anyway. And I think it's horrifying. You know, I often make the joke that, it's kind of a crass, dark comedy, that when the left argues for sterilizing their own children, yeah, well, okay. If that's what they want to do, the end result will be these people not having any more children. They're aborting their kids and sterilizing them. The end result will be the planet's conservative. Probably Muslim, to be completely honest. But the issue here is we don't want people victimized, especially children who can't consent. But that's what's happening. The end result is going to be these people's lives being destroyed. Now that they're beginning to legalize, and they have for some while now, 20 years in Belgium, euthanasia for otherwise healthy individuals. What happens to these kids who are sterilized, who grow up and say, I hate my life and I don't want to be this? Yeah, I think we know. Here's a story from 2018. A woman's final Facebook message before euthanasia. I'm ready for my trip now. Assisted suicide in the Netherlands include a 29-year-old who had nothing wrong with her physically. ADF International. Europe's top human rights court rules Belgium violated right to life in euthanasia case. There's some pushback. The European Court of Human Rights ruled that Belgium failed to conduct proper investigation into the circumstances of the 2012 euthanasia of Godelieve de Troyer. While judgment dismissed challenge to Belgium's euthanasia legal framework, the facts of the case send clear warnings of the dangers of euthanasia and the fiction of legal safeguards. A woman, another one. Healthy. Older. Killed. Now, I want to draw a distinction. I want to make sure I draw the distinction between the physically healthy and those who are suffering. I know a lot of people who are pro-life and who are conservative don't agree with euthanasia in any capacity. That's not me. In the story from Reuters from July, after long legal battle, Peru confirms woman's right to euthanasia. This woman had a degenerative muscle disease. She couldn't move. She was bedridden and couldn't do anything. She was only alive because a machine was keeping her alive. Now, I have questions about that. I wonder, is it God's plan for your body to fail, but for machines to keep you alive? I don't know. Perhaps not. I don't know. I think there'll be different perspectives on this. I take a more natural approach that if an individual cannot live and they are suffering from a disorder, disease, and it ceases, it inhibits their function, well, then maybe they have a right to say, like, I am not living this life. Here's the challenge. I am not the arbiter of morality. I'll say that. I say that a million times. It is because of this that we've opened the door to otherwise healthy people. It's a very similar argument to abortion, you should understand. When they say the health of the mother, are we talking about a debilitating disease that would kill you? Or are we talking about the mental health in which the woman will be physically completely fine? You see, once they pass these rules, it becomes up to the doctor to decide what is or isn't debilitating. And then you end up with a 23-year-old woman saying, my depression is debilitating, so be it. Now, it's coming here. I mean, this stuff is shocking. Disturbing. Experts troubled by Canada's euthanasia laws. August 11th, 2022. Alan Nichols had a history of depression and other medical issues, but none were life-threatening. When the 61-year-old Canadian was hospitalized in June 2019 over the fears he might be suicidal, he asked his brother to bust him out as soon as possible. Within a month, Nichols submitted a request to be euthanized, and he was killed. Despite concerns raised by his family and a nurse practitioner. His application for euthanasia listed only one health condition: hearing loss. Nichols' family reported the case to police and health authorities, arguing that he lacked the capacity to understand the process and was not suffering unbearably. Among the requirements for euthanasia, they say he was not taking needed medication, wasn't using the cochlear implant that helped him hear, and that hospital staffers improperly helped him request euthanasia. They are going to do more of this. Now, here's the latest. Canadian soldier with PTSD outraged when VA suggests euthanasia. A man who called and said, "I'm suffering." They said, "Why don't you die?" Now, someone said to me on Twitter, "What's the point? Why are you so mad? There's no obligation to live." I actually agree from a liberty-minded and libertarian standpoint. Who's to make you live? I think the issue is we want to help people because life is good. But here's the more important point. You want to make an individualist argument? Fine. But you're a collectivist authoritarian. So here's what happens. They legalize euthanasia. Then you start protesting government. You say our leaders are corrupt and I refuse to live this way. You get involved in some protests and they arrest you. They then release a statement saying this person is clearly suffering and depressed. After a conversation with them, they said, "Perhaps I just should not be alive. And so we decided to euthanize them." The family showed up with smiles on their faces saying, "Thank you so much for taking care of our loved one." What's to say when the government is legally allowed to kill people that they don't just come out and say, "This individual chose it"? What's to say there's not some bad doctor? And maybe it's an edge case. And he's blackmailing or abusing a woman. And then when she confronts him, he injects her with a drug and then says, "She came to me depressed and requested to die." What's to stop the government from purging dissidents by claiming that dissent is a mental defect? Now, of course, in the immediate, they won't come out and be like, "This person protested. They're insane. Kill them." They'll say, "When we brought this person for care, they were depressed, they were frantic and agitated, and they expressed to us their mental anguish. And ultimately, they decided euthanasia was the right thing for them." Who's to complain? And who's to argue otherwise? You see, the one thing the Nazis didn't have was this. They just went and started killing people. But imagine you have a legal framework by which people can choose to die. Well, what's to stop them from just claiming any witness to the contrary is dead? So no, we don't allow the government to sanction the killing of individuals. And that's happening at a governmental level in Canada. All roads lead to the reduction in population, be it euthanasia or, of course, the war. From the BBC, world must act now to stop Russia nuclear threat, Zelensky. Zelensky warns Russians are being prepared for nuclear warfare. Zelensky the other day called for a preemptive strike on Russia. A nuclear one, nonetheless. He didn't explicitly say that. He said that we shouldn't wait until after they nuke. We should act before they do with a preemptive strike. Right. That would be to imply we attack Russia, NATO does, declaring war, to send them a message. I assure you, that move would result in Russia actually launching the nukes. All roads lead to population reduction. Again, I'm not saying it's intentional. I'm not saying that there's an evil cabal of individuals who have planned this. I'm just saying these things are all heading in that direction. I covered this at 1 p.m. One of the most nightmarish stories I've ever heard. On PBS, progressive Democrat Cori Bush saying that she went to get an abortion, changed her mind, begged them to stop, but they started the instrument and killed her baby. Saying she was saying no, stop, but they ignored her and did it anyway. Because all roads lead to population reduction. Now, it is true. Bill Gates gave a TED Talk where he said that through greater technology, we can reduce population growth by about 15%. It is true that Bill Gates is worried about overpopulation, and there are many other world leaders who are. Now, to a certain degree, I can respect the fear. To me, it is absurd, this belief that there will be infinite resources No. This planet is finite, and we should not be like yeast farting ourselves to death. That would not be fun. So we need to recognize that even though we may make up only a small fraction of, relative to the size of the planet, we don't consume that much, but the ecosystem is delicate, and we are causing problems. But I think the issue is not overpopulation, but population density, in which case the solution is spread people out. Now, we're starting to see that for sure. Remote working, the pandemic sure did result in a lot of people spreading out from big cities. Population density is still a problem. I'll explain it this way. I got a bunch of chickens. You know I love me some chickens. They are funny little critters. Okay, well, when they all start pooping like crazy, it builds up and you've got to go in and try and clean it. It becomes toxic and a problem. But if you have the chickens grazing in the yard and they're pooping all over, it's not that much more space. But when the rain comes, it all washes away. In fact, fertilizes the ground, a net benefit when dispersed properly. When they're in one tight space, you get mounds and mounds of crap and it starts smelling like ammonia and it can be bad for the chickens. New York City, hyperpopulation density, everyone crapping in the same place and it's causing pollutant chemical runoff. If you could split apart the cities and have people move around and spread out, the waste could be handled, human waste, for instance, with septic systems that you really don't got to do much for real. When done properly, septic systems, just let them do their own thing. The bacteria breaks it all down and it leaches out. And, depending on what you got going in there, you got to get a pump to come out and clean it out. And you're supposed to do that every so often. But nature, it can do its job so long it's not hyper concentrated. That's my view of what's going on with overpopulation. But what we see with everything is just less people. You've got the Cory Bush story, and they've got Kanye West. 50% of black death in America is abortion. Kanye West slams pro-choice campaigners as he wears lanyard with image of a fetus during his Tucker Carlson interview and says there's more black babies being aborted than born in New York City. I believe he's right. In 2013, there were around 5,000 more abortions than births of black babies in New York City, according to an official report published by the city. Now, why is it? Why is it that these Planned Parenthood centers tend to be in black and Latino neighborhoods? You got me. But again, there's a great point being made by Kanye West. They are aborting more babies than babies are being born. I wonder. That doesn't necessarily mean that the black population will shrink. Depends on how many babies are being born relative to how many people there are currently. But it seems like the end result, population growth reduction. It's weird. Bill Gates does a whole lot of operations in Africa. And these Planned Parenthood centers sure do happen to be around black neighborhoods a whole lot. Yeah, I'm outright saying it's racist. Hands down. I'm not one of these people who thinks that racism doesn't exist. Excuse me. In fact, I've argued that there is institutionalized racism. And I don't mean that an individual is walking up to somebody and saying, I don't like you for that race or whatever. I'm saying that baked into the system are the remnants of racist policies that have negative impacts on people, such as redlining. That's a fact. You've created this one area of poverty and crime. I think it would be great to find ways to solve that. Perhaps the issue is class-based. But the woke left doesn't really want that. And the Democrat establishment seems to be more hell-bent on just preventing more black people from existing. Serious question. Why are black people having more abortions than babies? Would like to know that. I don't know. I think we're seeing it across the board, though. Everything they've proposed. Greta Thunberg, January 2020, calls for end to all fossil fuel investment now at Davos Forum. Greta Thunberg says, where's the quote? We're not going to wait 5, 10, 20 years to take action we want to see. We're not the future of the world. We're the present. We're acting now. We cannot wait any longer. How dare you? How dare you? As she says to a room full of people who all completely agree with her. She gave a speech where she was like, we're not going to wait till 2030 or 2025 or even next year. Something like that. She wants to shut down fossil fuels now. I think the estimates are 60 million deaths within a few days if all fossil fuels were shut down. This is a call for an end to all fossil fuel investment. Okay. This will result in suffering and death. I'm sorry, that's the reality. Now, the ultimate question, are there too many people? Now, Elon Musk says no, and Bill Gates says yes. Take your pick. Take your pick. So what do you do? If you think there are too many people, are you going to come out and say there are too many people? I don't know. I think human beings don't take kindly to being told that they should be dead. And therein lies the challenge. Let's do a Marvel reference. You know, I like Marvel. Thanos. That was his whole thing. Overpopulation. Cull half of all life so the rest can flourish. It's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. But I think it made for a great villain in the movie. No one said he was a strong long-term thinker. His attitude was wipe out half of all life and it will flourish. And it makes an interesting point. He tells the character Gamora, when I killed half your planet, the rest have known nothing but full bellies. But what's to say in that capacity that everything is overpopulated? I don't know. You go to someone and say, here's what's going to happen. There's too many people, so we're going to get rid of some, somehow. The question is, which ones? And then they invariably say, how about the undesirables? How about the deplorables? How about the useless eaters? I'll admit, there are a lot of people that I think do nothing, contribute nothing. Useless eaters, what a brutal phrase. But it's not wrong. I'm not trying to be a dick. There are people who contribute nothing, and you know it. We talk about it all the time. People whose job is to write stories about Brad Pitt's junk, and they get $60,000 a year to do it. Why? What if people were doing meaningful jobs? What if people were building things, creating things, working on science and expanding things? That would be great. But that's not an overpopulation problem. You see, many of these problems of overpopulation can be solved by science and technology. And that means we have a cultural problem. Perhaps then, the solution is not population growth reduction. The solution is not abortion or sterilization. The solution is a cultural shift towards love, respect, and scientific advancement. I take you back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. Humans were not using cars. We were riding horses, and horses were pulling carriages. But I got bad news for y'all. Horses poop, and a lot. So in New York, the horses are walking around with bags on their asses, and when they take a dump, it plops into the bag. Back at the turn of the century, there was a fear. They said by the 20s, the city streets are going to be littered with mounds of horse manure everywhere because of population growth. There's too many horses. Yeah. Then we invented cars. And then all of a sudden, there was no horse poop at all. Our good friend Ian Crossland, co-host over at timcast.rl, makes a great point. Climate change, carbon dioxide, environmental disruption. He says, actually, we can mine carbon from the atmosphere to produce graphene. Everybody knows Ian loves graphene. If you don't watch Timcast IRL, you should. What happens when we start pulling too much carbon from the atmosphere and make graphene? What happens when graphene, our wonder material, replaces plastics? And then we start getting problems with that. Now it's like, we need to stop pulling graphene from the air because we're doing too much, start burning more. The carbon's being depleted. The planet's getting too cold. What then? You see, our solution to the horse manure problem was gasoline cars and diesel. And that resulted in carbon in the atmosphere. I certainly think that's a reality. And carbon does cause carbon dioxide causes a greenhouse effect. Okay. Trees naturally pull carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, from the air, and they used to make their mass. The mass of a tree, actually the air. People usually think that the mass of the tree comes from the dirt. That's not true. Otherwise, they'd be shoveling more dirt in the cities all the time. No, it comes from the air. Now, there's arguments that we're burning too much and putting too much carbon in the atmosphere. We're doing it faster than the trees can actually deal with. And we're also cutting down trees at the same time and then burning those. Maybe the answer is technology. Maybe we don't need to kill all humans. I know, I'm exaggerating. Maybe the answer isn't telling people to stop having kids. Maybe the answer is technology. Why don't we do what Elon Musk? We go to Mars. We colonize Mars. Then maybe, when we're overpopulated, hungry, and dirty, we become great explorers. Colonizers of distant planets. Resources await. You know what would be fantastic? If we could create a vessel and is big enough, build it in outer space. I think we should do this. I think we can do this. We build a massive spaceship. Massive. With a bunch of little spaceships for exploration and resource mining. And then we put thousands of people in it that agree to and say, now begins the journey of 1,000+ years. We send your vessel off to the nearest Earth-like planet to terraform it. And then when your vessel arrives, it will be the 30th generation, or if we're talking thousands of years, multiple generations. So you who embark on this quest won't live to see the arrival of the planet of the terraforming. But there will be many people who will, and they'll have kids, and they'll use these vessels. I think it would be a wonderful project to embark on. And then humanity becomes invincible. Because even if Earth is destroyed, our descendants will carry on, and with this technology, colonize worlds all over the place. I'm down, baby. You know, when Europe got crowded, they said, we're going to go find new worlds. I think we should do that. And I think the technology I think developing technology for this purpose will result in technology that will greatly benefit the Earth. And if instead of having to reduce the population, we send off people as pioneers of the stars, a net positive, something to strive towards, and a reduction in the population of the Earth. How about that? It'd be amazing. Heck of a journey. Only having a few thousand people in a vessel traveling towards what? Alpha Centauri? I don't know if there's inhabitable planets over there, but we would calculate and target, and Class M, they call it. And maybe that is the solution to all of this. Maybe we can do better than just euthanize sad people. Maybe we can bring purpose back to this planet, which inspires people and gives them a reason to live. In the meantime, what they're proposing just seems so disgusting and dark. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. tonight over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.